Hello ladies and gentlemen and movie lovers of all kind, and welcome back to the channel. As always, I am your host Brett Murphy, and for today's video it is going to be yet another ranking. And I am going to be ranking all 24 Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. So after 2 full years, the longest drought in the MCU's history, Black Widow is finally out. And of course, as expected, that means it's time to update my ranking. 2 quick little housekeeping things before we get into the video. Firstly is, if you do enjoy ranking videos, I have an entire playlist dedicated to all of my ranking videos. So be sure to check that out, and I guarantee you'll find something you like. And secondly is the exact same thing that I said with my Pixar ranking video. This is 24 movies, it is a lot to rank. So I'm going to try my best to stay away from the general stuff and instead focus on the aspects of these movies that I love and feel are more unique. The things that I believe help these movies stand out from the crowd and set each other apart. And now, with all that being said, let's hop right into things. Number 24, Thor: The Dark World. I want to start off by clearing the air right away. I don't dislike any of the MCU movies. Call me a Marvel or a Disney shill or whatever you want to, I unapologetically adore each and every one of these films. At least to a certain degree. Because let's face it, they're not all perfect. And I do find Thor: The Dark World to be the weakest of the bunch. Although there are still aspects that I do enjoy. I like how the relationship between Thor and Loki progresses. I like the lore of the Dark Elves, and the creature design is fantastic. And there are emotional moments that hit hard, like Frigga's death. And the final fight was actually fairly inventive and exciting. That being said though, the villain is painfully forgettable and the overall story is lackluster. Number 23, Thor. Only slightly edging out its predecessor is the original Thor. I really do like the whole fish out of water element that Thor goes through, even if his eyebrows are dyed blonde. Loki's manipulation of his family and the Asgardians is superbly done, and getting to explore Asgard in all of its lore for the very first time is unforgettable. I just find it's a bit slow overall, and the action is meh at its best. There's just really no big bombastic standout moments for me. Number 22, The Incredible Hulk. Easily one of the most underrated and unnecessarily hated movies in the MCU. But I guess that's kind of because it doesn't really feel like an MCU movie at all. It's not an origin story, and nor is it an action extravaganza. Instead, it's actually much more of a character study that follows Bruce Banner on the run looking for answers on how to fix him, while discovering ways to control his anger issues. I actually have always found that Edward Norton suits the role fairly well. And William Hurt is and has been perfect as General Ross. And Tim Roth as Abomination was a worthy foe. Not to mention the final fight sure packs a hell of a punch. Number 21, Iron Man 2. Another MCU gem that gets a ton of shit for no reason. Does it reach the heights of the first? Not even close. But it's a big, fun, exciting, and overall worthy sequel. Robert Downey Jr. crushes it as expected. Sam Rockwell is exceptional as Justin Hammer. This was ScarJo's introduction as Black Widow, and Don Cheadle proves that he should have been Rhodey from the very beginning. The action goes bigger and the story tries some things that both do and don't work. And Mickey Rourke just sort of phones it in. Number 20, Captain Marvel. Brie Larson was perfect for this role, and she nails it. I love Captain Marvel as a character. I love the retro 90s feeling of this movie. The de-aging is, for the most part, practically seamless. The action is thrilling, and I was exhilarated to hear that we were finally getting the Skrulls in the MCU. However, I didn't really love the way they were handled as a whole here. However, Ben Mendelsohn is wonderful, but Jude Law flops, as the villains of this movie are its biggest glaring shortcoming. Number 19, Ant-Man. This one is definitely up there for the funniest of the MCU. Top to bottom, the casting team did a phenomenal job here. They found a way to make this character feel real, fresh, and interesting. It perfectly blends laugh-out-loud comedy, creative action set pieces, and genuine heart. Just like the previous entry, however, I do believe it is lacking a memorable villain. Number 18, Ant-Man and the Wasp. Once again, we're going back to back, only unlike Thor, this time I feel it is the sequel that is superior. Ant-Man and the Wasp does everything that Ant-Man did well, only does it slightly better. Evangeline Lilly gets her much-deserved time to shine as the Wasp. They doubled down on the action and found ways to keep it just as thrilling and unique as before. And it fits perfectly into the MCU both before and after all of the events that surround it. Ghost had Promise as the villain. At least she was original, but still not among my favorites. However, this movie did further expand upon the quantum realm, which played a major role in the greater MCU. Number 17, Black Widow. This one was long overdue, but we did finally get a solo Black Widow film and I can't complain. Well, can't complain too much anyway. The family dynamic here is by far the best part, and all of the performances from the main cast are honestly exceptional, to the point that I really can't pick out just one standout. The action is slick and well shot, and the set pieces feel grand and epic. But the story falls apart in its crammed and lackluster final act, and sadly such a highly anticipated villain like Taskmaster was a letdown. Number 16, Spider-Man Homecoming. While not among my favorite Spidey flicks overall, I still find it to be wildly entertaining and a good fit for the MCU despite its late arrival. Tom Holland is the perfect embodiment of both Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Michael Keaton is a scene stealer as Vulture. Everything honestly just fits so right. It also makes perfect sense to me too, that a kid his age who grew up in the world of the Avengers would want to be like his idol Tony Stark, and want to be an Avenger himself. My biggest issue with the movie is that I find it feels just a little too small scale for my liking. Regardless, it delivers on everything else you've come to expect from the MCU. Number 15, Spider-Man Far From Home. And yet another superior sequel just slightly edging out its predecessor. Far From Home took everything great about Homecoming and amplified it in basically every single way. Coming hot off the heels of Endgame, this one really needed to impress, and for the most part it did. A few odds and ends that I wasn't a fan of, like the way they handled the blip, but it does deliver bigger and better action, heart, laughs, and excitement. I mean, even my complaint too about Homecoming being too small scale just gets thrown right out the window. Jake Gyllenhaal is magnificent as expected as Mysterio, even if I don't love that he's basically just another Iron Man villain. Number 14, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. While it doesn't quite reach the heights of its predecessor, this one has really grown on me more and more with each and every rewatch. It trades in big action set pieces for beautiful character moments, devastating revelations, and a whole lot of love and laughs. It's bright, vibrant, colorful, and goofy. Everything that the Guardians should be. And Yondu's death will never not make me well up like a big baby. Kurt Russell is clearly having the time of his life as Ego, Baby Groot is adorable, and Mantis is a wonderful new addition to the team. Number 13, Doctor Strange. Marvel's most mind-bending and brain-melting entry as of this point in time. After nearly a decade into the MCU, we finally get to enter the world of magic and sorcery. This movie does such an exceptional job at making all of this rapid expansion feel very natural. We see countless new worlds, dimensions, and so much more. And just like the rest of the MCU's casting, Benedict Cumberbatch is sensational as the Sorcerer Supreme. It's just sad that the MCU delivered us another lackluster villain, despite having someone in the role that is normally so superb as Mads Mikkelsen. Number 12, Black Panther. While I still believe that this is slightly overrated as a whole, this movie had already been growing on me over the last couple of years. And now with the tragic passing of the national treasure that was Chadwick Boseman, it hits harder than ever before. And I think it goes without saying that I don't think anybody else out there could have possibly portrayed this character better than Chadwick. But I'd like to add that the exact same can be said about Michael B. Jordan as Killmonger. The world of Wakanda is marvelous. The story this movie tells and the commentary it makes is powerful. And it was and continues to be a very necessary movie for its time. Not to mention, it deserved the Oscars it got, a first for the MCU. The downside to this movie, however, is its not so great CGI, and its sadly quite pitiful final fight. Number 11, Captain America: The First Avenger. I mean, maybe it's only here because I am a huge sucker for World War II movies, but I truthfully and honestly adore this flick. Nobody, and I mean nobody, could have portrayed this character the way Chris Evans has. The living, breathing embodiment of Captain America. And not just physically either, but also at heart. Though this movie may be a little too cheesy and corny for some, I find it only helps this movie be exactly what it was meant to be. Oh, and Hugo Weaving always plays the best villains. Number 10, Iron Man 3. Now, as a matter of fact, this one might actually be the most underrated and overhated of the MCU, because this movie gets way more hate than it deserves. Sure, okay, I get that people were pissed about the Mandarin twist, but for me, I've always felt that it worked just fine. Not to mention, we are now officially getting the real Mandarin in the upcoming Shang-Chi, so it's time for all of those haters to put some respect on Iron Man 3's name. The handling of Tony's PTSD is superb, and helps to make the movie and its characters feel grounded in reality. Guy Pearce and the Extremis program are incredible foes. The action goes the biggest of the Iron Man flicks, lessons are learned, the stakes are higher than ever, and the jokes all land. Number 9, Avengers Age of Ultron. And yet another MCU flick that gets way more hate than it deserves. I honestly feel this one is every bit as good as its fellow Avengers films. It raises the stakes, gives us one of the MCU's best villains in James Spader's Ultron, introduces us to some new heroes, progresses the overall storyline and sets up for subsequent projects. It has a lot going on, but handles it all very well, while still managing to deliver on the MCU's expected bombastic action, laughs, and heart. Number 8, Iron Man. Yes, the one that started it all is still among its best. A far more narratively focused film than many MCU newcomers might expect. But believe me, it is always very refreshing to return to. The action scenes are limited but hit very hard when they arrive. The jokes are present but not as frequent, and it is far more grounded in reality than any of the others. And here, Robert Downey Jr. started the biggest career revival in Hollywood history, as he was born and bred to play Tony Stark. Jeff Bridges is a worthy and memorable villain, and it does just enough to set up for everything that was to come. Number 7, Thor Ragnarok. So I know that this one is apparently not everyone's cup of tea, but I unapologetically freaking love it. I love the bright, vibrant, wacky colors, costume design, and production design. This movie is by far the goofiest and over the top of the MCU, but it all just works for me. It basically reinvented the character of Thor, and for the better in my mind. It introduced us to Valkyrie, gave us a talking Hulk, as well as many other memorable side characters. It's constantly laugh-out-loud funny, has big thrilling action set pieces, a killer score, and still manages to leave time for some heartfelt and down-to-earth moments. Number 6, Guardians of the Galaxy. I don't think anyone ever expected this one to work out as well as it did. Following a cast of relatively unknown characters, and directed by a then mostly unknown director, this movie was by far the most unique and inventive of the MCU at that point. And yet, despite the odds, it managed to pull in nearly $800 million at the box office, as well as 2 Oscar nominations, and is one of the MCU's highest reviewed and most well-regarded flicks. It's fun, exciting, hilarious, surprisingly emotional, and altogether otherworldly. Not too bad for a bunch of a-holes. Number 5, Captain America: The Winter Soldier. A dark and thrilling espionage flick that completely shook up the trajectory of the MCU going forward. Cap's sequel was a major departure from his first flick. We get a much grittier and bigger sequel with this one, as Cap is left not knowing who to trust when he discovers that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been compromised. He's confronted by both friends and foes, new and old, which leads to one of the MCU's most exhilarating and thrilling flicks to date. Superb performances all around, big twists, stellar action, and set pieces. Number 4, The Avengers. In 2012, this was it. Everything that each of the previous movies had been leading up to. 4 years of build-up, and it needed to pay off. And did it ever? In my eyes, they completely stuck the landing. Has it aged all that well? Maybe not as well as others, but it's still among the top tier of the MCU, and the superhero/comic book movie genre in general. The cast blends so beautifully together as their ideals clash. Loki was the perfect choice for the first big villain, and it does all the right things to bring the team together and make it feel organic and natural. all while setting up for the future. With marvelous action, loads of genuine laughs, a memorable and now iconic score from Alan Silvestri, and now what is regarded as one of film history's most iconic shots. Number 3. Avengers Infinity War. Okay, so after the first Avengers, this is what everything was leading up to. Getting that first glimpse of Thanos, and subsequent cameos were all leading up to his inevitable clash with Earth's mightiest heroes. And here we finally were, the first of 2 parts. Josh Brolin is absolutely undeniably stellar as Thanos. Truly one of cinema's greatest villains. Everything in this movie is just flat out exceptional. The visuals, the score, the action, the emotions. This movie's stakes were higher than ever before and they were firing on all cylinders. Not only did they deliver on everything they set out to do, but they gave us one of the most devastating and shocking endings of all time. Number 2. Captain America: Civil War. Okay, some people may be a bit confused by this placement, but if you know me, then you should know that this was by far my favorite MCU flick, all the way up until the release of the number 1 spot. For me, this one is the most emotionally fueled of the franchise. Tony and Cap are at odds. The team is divided, forcing them into an inevitable showdown with each other. And I really did understand where both sides were coming from. And this movie really didn't hold back just because they were all friends. My favorite part, however, is how they made everything feel so real and grounded. It is very much so a politically charged plot. And it makes sense. Seeing the aftermath of the events of the previous movies, and all the cell phone footage of the Avengers saving the world, really put things into perspective, as in there is a lot of collateral damage to this hero thing. It's always hit me so hard, and has stuck with me for this long. And number 1, Avengers Endgame. This was it. It was the endgame. Everything was going to be different after this. This was the end of so many journeys, so many stories. All of it was coming to a head here. The culmination of over a decade and 20+ movies worth of work. All paying off. Not only did it meet my expectations, but it exceeded them in every single way imaginable. I still remember seeing the first Iron Man on opening night at just 9 years old. And I will forever remember seeing this opening day in a packed theater. It is by far my favorite theater-going experience of my lifetime thus far. I laughed, I cried a lot, I cheered, I gasped. I felt every emotion on the known human spectrum. It was truly an experience unlike any other in my eyes. And for that, for me, it is the best that the MCU has to offer. So that is all for today's video, folks. Be sure to let me know down in the comments if you agree or disagree with my ranking. And feel free to let me know what you'd like to see me rank next. If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And if you'd like to see more content, consider subscribing to my channel and ringing that little bell icon. That way you can be notified about all of my latest uploads. And as always, stay safe, thank you so much for watching, and that's a wrap. Hey you, yeah you, if you made it this far, just know I appreciate you, and while you're here, consider hitting that subscribe button.